Good evening, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is Shaky Politics. Let's get shaking. Welcome to Shaky Politics. Tonight we're discussing the tremendous emotional toll suffered by the survivors and family members of the Sandy Hook mass shooting, and the support services they need now and into the future. Joining us from Vancouver is Chris Ducharme, president of the BC Bereavement Helpline and founder of BC Victims of Homicide. Thanks, Chris, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Brent.
BC Victims of Homicide is a non-profit program of the BC Bereavement Helpline and specializes in providing free peer support groups and direct counseling to relatives and friends of homicide victims. They provide services across Canada and into the U.S. Chris, I'd imagine you speak with a lot of victims each year.
Yeah, over the last year, I had personally counseled over 100 victims of homicide in the United States and over 350 across Canada. So quite a broad experience in working with many types of victims.
Before we get into the Sandy Hook discussion, Chris, I'd like you to share a little bit of your own story. You have a personal experience with homicide.
I do, Brent. When I was just 14 years old in 1996, my mother was murdered by her boyfriend, who was a former Vancouver police officer.
Chris, let's take a quick look at the case sheet. Your mother, Patricia Ducharme, was 41 years old when she was murdered in March of 1996 in Campbell River. She has 4 children, which of course includes you. She was murdered by Brock Graham, who was 37. He was a former Vancouver police officer, as you mentioned. He was a hero cop who was SWAT trained in the special use of lethal force. And he was also the prime suspect in another murder, a previous murder to actually moving in with you and your mom. Chris, what more can you tell us about the night of your mother's murder?
I was actually not at the home at the time, but my mother and Brock had got in an argument. He was drunk, my mom was sober, and this argument, my mom was asking him to leave because he was becoming abusive, and he refused. He actually went into a full-on rage and chased my mom up the stairs into the bedroom and had covered her mouth with his hand and then put a sock in her mouth, and then they rolled onto the floor, and he strangled her with a television cord and then took an axe to her skull and stabbed her several times. So after that, and placed her in the bathtub where she was eventually found. And
from what I understand, he also left an apology note.
Yes, he did. He actually stayed around the home for the next couple days, actually cleaning the house and cleaning her body, and then he went and purchased a red rose and wrote an apology letter and placed that on her body in the bathtub.
In the years following the murder, Chris, you became a national advocate for victims' rights, raising thousands of dollars for charity and playing a critical role in helping to increase the profile of homicide victims, leading to an increase in government funding for grief counseling and other services. Turning now to Sandy Hook, and based on both your personal and professional experience, what challenges lie ahead for the victims?
Brent, the initial shock that these kids are going through is going to last 6 months to a year. After that time, when all the supports are going to be falling away, all the media is not going to be there, the school in itself is going to feel like they don't want to talk about it anymore because they've already rehashed it so many times. It's going to still need ongoing support. That support is going to need to be there for the rest of their lives. These kids are going to need to have family that they can rely and trust upon. So I even have a stronger concern really with the parents. The parents are the ones that are really caring for these children. Not only that, they're caring for themselves. So they're going to have a huge burden upon themselves to carry that weight. So I think it's really important to develop that support network for the adults as well.
I'd imagine, unlike the adults, for the kids being as young as they are, they may be a bit more resilient and able to tuck the memory away, while the parents don't have that same ability to do that.
I would have to say that the emotions they're feeling and experiencing may not be realized until a later point in life. It may be 5 or 10 or 15 years. We, at the BC Bereavement Helpline with the Victims of Homicide program, we actually have victims sometimes 20, 40 years later coming to us saying that they haven't resolved it because they haven't had the support they needed.
And Chris, if the kids and the parents don't get that support that they need after a mass shooting, Do we see any correlation with an increase in alcohol and drug abuse and potentially families breaking up? Oh,
definitely. Yeah. A lot of parents, when they lose a child, losing a child is the hardest thing, hardest type of loss. And losing a child unnaturally is combined to make it even harder as the most difficult grieving process. And to add on to that, the traumatic experience, the real trauma that's occurred. So we're looking at a few different levels here of grief, and that's what we call complex grief. And so, Brent, when we start looking at these parents and taking sometimes even the responsibility, there's always thoughts, I should have, would have, could have, and those sort of things are just torment to the parents.
And immediately after, one of the things that hits you like a ton of bricks is your responsibility, and it hits you in ways that are unexpected. It hits you in ways that are not necessarily helpful. The issue of being able to protect your children and to be, that's our only job as parents. If you shut it down and you close the doors and you pretend that what happened didn't happen, or you try to remove that person from the tree, the long-term consequences of that kind of reaction are devastating.
And right after Ben died, he said, this is tough, but he said, you promised you would protect us.
Yeah.
And I did promise him that.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do I say to him? I can't change what happened. I know it wasn't our fault. We just sent him to school. But I'll do whatever I can to help protect Nate and protect Ben's spirit.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a feeling of anger that we, instead of turning towards the real root of the pain, we actually turn upon each other. And couples, I've seen a husband actually and a wife blame each other, and that definitely tearing apart the family.
Well, Chris, let's just hope the support services that are needed are in place now and long-term into the future. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Brent. Glad to be here.
If you'd like to find out more about the services or to volunteer at the BC Bereavement Helpline or the BC Victims of Homicide, please check out the links below in the video description. Thanks for watching. I'm Brent Stafford, and you have just been shaken.